Everybody, it's 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon, and this is August 7th, I believe. And guess what? We had rain yesterday. Were you out in it, Steve?
No. I managed to stay in working until mid-afternoon. The clouds parted and the sun came out, and it was gorgeous.
Well, that's Oregon for you. So, you know what I've been hearing lately is a lot of people complaining about Zoom fatigue. So I was wondering, how many hours a day do you spend on Zoom, Mr. Tech?
And I'm afraid, given the day job, it's not unusual for it to be 4 or 5 hours a day.
Yikes. And you still feel pretty normal?
As normal as one can feel after doing that for 5 months. It is old.
It's getting old, very old. So we have a good show today, but before that, I would just like to acknowledge that we lost our oldest resident last week. Betty Thompson would have been 104, but she passed away in Madrona Grove. And until just a few months ago, Betty had been living in her own home. She was out and about in her walker. She'd go up and get the mail. And I hope that we have an opportunity to read an obituary of her because she was quite an astonishing woman. She flew planes to air bases during the Second World War. I think one of the first women to do that. So we remember Betty. Now, today's program, we have two longish-term residents, both of whom live in classic cottages in the northwest section of town. We don't get over there very often. Walt Garvin and his wife, Pat, have been at Rose Villa for 14 years. And then we'll talk to Margaret Hamilton, who has lived here since 2013. Walt is being interviewed by that jack of all trades, Duran, who's one of the most helpful and gracious guys on campus. We sat down with Jack and Walt in Walt's backyard. And Steve, would you just describe that glorious place?
It is a garden with the incredible density of more different types of plants than you could count, and a great apple tree.
And you will hear a chorus of birds during this interview. It was the middle of the afternoon, and yet there were birds flying about everywhere.
And even a little bit of a video of a hummingbird that happened to be close by.
Jack intended to talk to Walt about the Hopkins Demonstration Forest, which is a privately owned 140-acre forest near Oregon City. And it's open to the public for hiking, for exploration, education, about forest management and ecology. Walt's been volunteering there since he and Pat moved to Rose Villa 12 to 14 years ago. But as the conversation unfolded, we soon learned that Walt has been involved with timber management for most of his adult life, first in his youth as a lumberman, and then as the owner of his own timber plot. So Steve, let's meet Walt Garvin and learn about his history with forestry.
Okay.
Hello there, my name is Jack Duran, and I'm here to interview, what's your name again? Walt Garvin, who has been living at Rose Villa for about 12 years now. And I think he lived here long enough in this apartment that they moved him out and refurbished it too, is that correct?
Yeah.
And he does several things in the wood shop. He does little landscapes cut from thin slices of wood that are really neat. He also has built miniature furniture and cabins and things that are really neat. And I think he used to be Mr. Fix-It around here.
Yeah, the shop used to do a lot of fixing.
Walt's going to talk today about the Hopkins Demonstration Forest, which is down near, which is, I guess the address is Oregon City, right?
But South Oregon City, about 6 miles.
Yeah. Walt has done a lot of things in his life. He's told me a few of them. If he wants to talk about those, I'll let him tell you.
When I was younger, we lived on a dairy, and so I sold the dairy, and I worked in the logging woods after high school, And shortly after I left, I got out of the service during the Korean conflict. And I showed up sober every day, so I'd become the manager, the hook tender for until I retired. And I had three different operations going at one time. And I logged in redwoods where we would cut the trees and split them in half and then split them in quarter in order to make them small enough to go onto a truck. So you don't have many trees like that now. When I worked in fir, a lot of times we'd have a one load, but a two log load was pretty common. Now a big load is 6 logs down to 20 or 40 logs. So they'll take down to a 5-inch diameter tree at the top. The Chinese will take anything down to 12-inch top. And so there's a difference there. Since our president has talked to the Chinese the wrong way, they haven't been buying any timber. So they would pay about $10 more a thousand. And interesting, it's about a third of the cost is logging and getting the wood to the mill, and the other third is the logger. And so you only get about a third of what the log is worth in the end. The timber we have, part of it was owned by my mother-in-law, but she would let anybody come in and log, and she wasn't getting anything of it. So Pat and I bought it from her, is how we got the timber. And then I bought some more from the neighbor who, so I got way over 550 some acres timber that I have. I log 20 to 40 acres at a time and plant back about every other year. And with intention of being a 40-year rotation.
And you go down there pretty regularly, don't you?
So I go down about every month. I used to go down and make sure the roads, because most of them are dirt roads at that time, and I would make sure the water bars and the water was running off the road instead of down the road. And if it runs down the road, it washes the road and fills up the creek with mud. The state rules are pretty strict on making sure you put in good water bars, and if you don't keep the property drained so it's not draining onto the creek, then they'll make you either do that or else you have to pay higher taxes.
Is that property in the Coast Range, or is it on the...
It's in the Coast Range. It's about 16 miles west of Bandon, if you know where Bandon is. To get to Bandon by driving, it's about 30 miles or 40 miles. I've been involved with the demonstration force about 12 years, but Hopkins has been going since about 1990. Yeah, Hopkins was a forester. He worked for the Forest Service, and I know a lot of people who worked for the Forest Service and bought timber afterwards. Mrs. Hopkins, when Mr. Hopkins died, he had 2 daughters, and neither one of them wanted to manage the forest, and so she worked through the county agent, and there was a group called Forest Forever, which bought it then, and they had to log off 20 acres or so to pay her off. Mainly referred to the demonstration forest because it was put together after Hopkins left it, sold it, and showed different ways of logging and managing your forest. Is mainly the reason they call it a demonstration forest. You can look at it and see a lot of the different ways you can manage. And they use it for training. In the summertime, usually they hire about 2 or 3 teachers to come and do some work so that the school will learn something from it, the teachers will. Some of the trees are probably 60, 70 years old, but most of them are 10 to 40 years old. Most of the mills will are only interested in smaller logs because they were too big for the mills. So what they do is they log a little bit, plant and log and plant, and show how they can manage the forest in different ways. I show people why they plant Doug fir because it's a more profitable one. It grows a lot faster if you're out in sunshine. If it's not, then get the sunshine, why the trees won't grow very good. And that's the reason why you see clear cuts, because they clear cut, and that's what copskins is. Most of the time they'll clear cut small tract and then plant back. There's a lot of trails at Hopkins that you can go on, and I worked with the Boy Scouts. We've made different shelters there out of split cedar so that they learn how to do that.
The shelters were for
when you're walking, hiking, if it's raining, well, you just go in the shelter.
Yeah. Any idea how many miles of trails there are there?
They say 5 miles. That's probably pretty close to it. It's only 140 acres total. They bought another 20.
Do you still hike much?
Not as much as I used to. The time I go down there, I got over 500 acres to wander around, check the roads.
Maybe when when the coronavirus thing passes, maybe you could set up a field trip for some people here and take them down there.
Yeah, I'd take a field trip to Hopkins.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
It's close, and I'd gladly go with anybody who wanted to go down there, because we can walk the trail and stay far enough away from each other. There's some redwoods. One area, about an acre that they planted in redwoods, and there's most of it's in fir. Last year ago, I was out down there, and we were planting some more fir to fill in the ones that died. The state requires you to have at least growing trees in 3 years after you log. If the trees die, then you have to plant back and then keep them going. They log a little bit to pay off to do some building and stuff. They've got a good shop out there, and they've got another building that you can rent.
How hard are the trails? Are they suitable for a lot of the residents here?
Most of it is so they can either walk if they want to, they can walk the roads. Some of the trails are fairly steep, but most of them are not. And it depends on whether it's raining or not. I usually go out there when it's not raining, because the trails are not that steep. And you get down to where you find the beaver pond. It's about a half-acre pond that the beaver had built, and on the creek, and there's a little creek you can walk along, and you can look at the cedar trees and the bark where the birds have pecked and built holes for they make a nest, and in some cases for getting bugs. It's about a half-hour drive out there, and a big parking lot, and then you can, there's one place there's snapshots, which they'll...
For those who can't see, we're watching a hummingbird feed right in front of us.
Yeah, yesterday the bees were eating out, but this year not.
There is a website. You can just Google Hopkins Demonstration Forest, and there's a lot of information there, plus some brochures that can be printed off. Well, Walt, thanks a lot. Thanks for letting us do this, and
Listen,
for
pleasure to
surviving 12 years here.
Thank you, Jack and Walt. And Walt, a special thanks for all the volunteer work that you have done, not only at Hopkins, but certainly at Rose Villa as well. Walt's been a long time worker in the wood shop and has populated the campus with birdhouses. So Steve, have you ever been to Hopkins Forest?
I have not.
I went out there not too long ago. It's a beautiful place with trails that are easy enough, and the pond is pretty cool. I told them that I knew Walt Garvin, and they all had great things to say about him. So if you go, be sure and mention that. So Steve, are you likely to go? Are you a hiker?
Oh yeah, I think Walt got me definitely interested, and it's close enough to be convenient, and a little bit of hiking is always fun.
Are you an outdoorsman? You're avoiding the issue.
I used to do a whole lot more backpacking and cross-country skiing than I have in the last few years.
Yep. That's the process we're engaged in.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing I thought about during this interview was just how much of Oregon is actually forested and how much of Clackamas County is forested. A number of us are new to Clackamas County, and I was surprised to learn that 75% of the landmass of Clackamas is forest. Half of that is owned by the federal government, and a significant chunk of private land is in the hands of the timber barons. Only a small amount of land is in the hands of local owners like Walt. So that raises some questions when you think about it, about the timber laws and who's profiting from the harvesting of Oregon's beautiful timber. And then there's the contested nature of the practices themselves among those who maintain that forests sequester carbon and should be left standing. So lots to think about from this conversation with Walt that we thought would be about Hopkins Demonstration Forest. So our next guest, Margaret Hamilton, is interviewed by Paul Wathen. Paul is a resident of North Pocket, and he's developing a new Zoom series called Village Voices. He'll be filming presentations by residents on specific topics of their interest. And once the new website is up and running, which should happen by the end of the month, hopefully, you'll be able to see some of the interviews that Paul is working on. But turning to Margaret, as we said, she's lived here for 7 years, and this matchup between Paul and Margaret is all about education and intellectual stimulation. Margaret has had a long and varied career, not just as a teacher, but as an educator. And when she came to Rose Villa, she established our only identifiable education program, the interest group, which then turned into lifelong learning. She has also contributed to many, many lively discussions on the UNA series. So Steve, let's find out about intellectual stimulation in Margaret's life and on the campus.
Here we go.
Hello, I'm Paul Wathen. I'm in North Pocket, and I've been at Rose Villa for a little over a year now. And this afternoon, I will be interviewing Margaret Hamilton. Good afternoon, Margaret. How are you?
Fine.
How long have you been at Rose Villa?
Since 2013, so I just turned 7 this last June.
Okay. I know you've been involved in some educational activities here at Rose Villa, but your educational career, I think, goes back a lot farther than that. How did it begin?
Oh, Lordy. You know, I think as when I was an undergraduate at UC Santa Barbara, I had done a couple of quarters at UC Berkeley studying primatology, study of non-human primates. and humans as well. Humans are primates, but this was a focus on the prosimians, the monkeys and the apes. And I went back to Santa Barbara to finish my bachelor's degree. And the instructor of the intro course at that time asked me if I would like to do a couple of lectures on primatology. And so I got up in front of an auditorium. This is Intro to Physical Anthropology. So it's like an 800-person class, and did a lecture on the primates and totally enjoyed it. I don't know why I've always been comfortable speaking in front of groups. I guess it's I'm ham at heart, something like that. But then I went ahead from there. I went to grad school at the University of Michigan, and I was a teaching assistant for a couple of years.
What subjects were you teaching?
Introduction to Physical Anthropology.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then went on to my first and only job in academia was at the University of Delaware on the East Coast. And I was the only physical anthropology on the staff. And so you're supposed to be doing nothing but publishing. And I did a little bit of that, but not enough. And I just knew that combined with the problems in my department, which I did not create, but which affected all of us, it was really, I felt time to leave academia. So I got a job with the National Audubon Society. And that was also, the teaching carried over there because a lot of my work was with our local chapters, and we would go and do workshops on things like how to communicate with your Congress critters, and how to work with your state legislature. That was a fun job, but it involved more travel than I wanted. And when they laid off 20 people, including myself, because they had a budget shortfall, I went back to my home, which was California. And from there got a job teaching or developing courses in continuing education. I left that job because I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and it was a small college with very iffy health insurance. I got a job at UCLA Extension, and again, developed courses in the environmental science area. Then I left that and went to Cal State Fullerton to finish my career again in continuing education. But the one thing that I learned from particularly the continuing education experience was that a lot of people don't know how to teach. And I came to understand through coaching them that there are certain skills that a good teacher has, which people do not intuitively know. And so I would sit down and I'd watch somebody the first time they met with a class, and they had a lot of expertise because we wanted to be working with people. We wanted them to be teaching from their own personal experience. These were people who were doing the work that they were talking about. And they would start tossing out one thing and another. And there was no rhyme or reason to all of this material that was coming out of them. And I could just see it was sort of falling on the floor and not landing in the right places. And so I developed a training program for my instructors, which basically was the basics of teaching material. And it started with the idea that you need to give somebody a framework for what they're going to be working with. It is sort of like an overview of the entire field, and then break it down into major categories. And explain as you go along. When you have a set of facts about a particular topic, you say, this is where it goes on your framework. And I used to use a metaphor of the Christmas tree. I'd say, you gotta give them a tree first before you start throwing all the Christmas balls at them so they know where to hang them. Or probably a better analogy would be the just a filing cabinet. What file are you going to put that stuff in? Give them the file folder names first and show them what drawer all of this is going to be in. And after you've done a particular topic, go back to the framework again and review for them. That's where this is. Now we're going to go on to this next file here. And it's that old basic, I think the military does it this way. Tell them what you're going to do, then do it, and then tell them what you did. So you're constantly sort of summarizing as you go along and reviewing for them again and again where each thing fits. And that is the way a learning adult can retain the material and put it into an organized whole so that all of it makes sense when they're done. And as I thought about it, I thought, that's intuitively what I've been doing all along. And so when I got here, I've discovered that if you bring a skill to Roseville, somehow you're going to end up doing it here as well. So
how did you apply your skill?
Well, I was approached by Alan Haldeman, who is still here on campus. He had started something he called the interest group. And it was basically choosing a topic from the great courses and then watching a half-hour lecture each week and then spending a half hour discussing the contents of it. The topics vary quite a bit. And he approached me less than a year after I'd been here and asked me if I would like to take over with the next course, which was Turning Points in American History. And I really enjoyed the class. And the one thing I asked myself, I would watch them in advance. And I always asked myself, what do people need to know to absorb this? And so I started doing a little bit of research to give people a good outline before the lecture actually started, so that again, they could take the information and put it in the framework that we had discussed. And sometimes it was just a matter of picking out some stray information that could be expanded into a more interesting sidebar for them. So we did that for a long time, and we covered stuff like we had, well, naturally, I went through my specialties. So we did one, a history of evolutionary theory, which is kind of fun because it really starts back in the 16th century with people speculating about possible changes over time. So we did that, we went that. And then we did a course which we really loved, which was the history of food and culture. So we had a great time with that. And then somebody wanted to do mindfulness, so we did mindfulness. And I can't remember, we had a Turning Points in World History was another one. And then Marilyn Gottschall did one on the study, that was a course about Islam. And I know people enjoyed that quite a bit. But we got to the point where I had done everything I thought I could with it. I really wanted a break. And the class didn't want to stop this. And by that time, I changed the title to lifelong learning, because that's what it is. So a group of people got together and formed what I call a steering committee. including Joe Eusterman was the one who stepped up first, and Eddie Cole, and oh Lordy, I'm going to forget some names right now, but the subject that, the topic that Joe suggested was documentaries. Why don't we start showing some documentaries? And we have done a lot with that over the past year. Actually, I think we've been at it more than that, but things like something on the Mayo Clinic, a documentary on Maya Lin, who designed the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. And wow, I wish I could, some of them are, again, on environmental topics, climate change, and others are on political topics. I think we did Inequality for All with Robert Reich. And I know we have at some point, when we finally get back into the PAC, we'll probably do The Pieces I Am, which has subsequently been on PBS, but we all agreed it's worth seeing again, which is a story about Toni Morrison. And you know, the possibilities are unlimited. And what I like about it is I don't have to do it every single week. We sort of rotate around and we take turns and do what we did. I did just before COVID set in, I had done something called Lives Well Lived, which was a wonderful documentary done by a woman at Cal State San Luis Obispo. And she went around her area and identified all these elders who were doing all kinds of wonderful things like senior Olympics and artistic expression and practicing yoga and so on. And that will go into the library eventually. My printer's broken, so I'm not able to print out the stuff that I need to put on it before it's donated, but we'll get that taken care of. And now I've run out of steam.
Well, this has been wonderful. These documentary courses are on hiatus at the moment, but they will resume as soon as we're able to get back into the pack.
I believe so.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, this has been quite a ride. Margaret, thank you very much for sharing all of this with us. It's been a delight to talk with you.
Thank you. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Paul and Margaret, for your many contributions to discussions over the years. Lifelong learning is incredibly important as we age, and particularly as we continue to be sequestered in our homes. Margaret lamented in this interview that such learning is on hold until we can gather together again. But I'm wondering, what are our intellectual needs and how can we meet them during the pandemic? We've found ways to meet our other needs via Zoom, and perhaps we can use it for this purpose as well.
At the risk of yet more Zoom fatigue, but
yes, but your mind will be working, so you'll forget about that.
Yes.
So why couldn't we watch some of the great courses together, or some of the wonderful things that are streaming, and then gather on Zoom to discuss them? Seems like a pretty easy thing to do. What do you say, Steve?
Or gather together to discuss a Village Voices episode even.
Yeah. So one could make that happen technologically if one wanted to organize it, right?
Indeed.
Okay, out there you have it. If you need a bit of stimulation, suggest a video, a time, get yourself a Zoom host. Susan Hine can help you do that, and you'll be off and thinking. Okay, that's it for this week. And next week we have a lovely, gentle conversation between Kay Schmerber, who will be Kay Schmerber, who's interviewing Gail Katagiri. And Gail worked with the San Francisco Zen Hospice Organization for a number of years. So the two of them are going to be talking about death and dying. And it's a very uplifting, gentle, and sweet interview. So I hope you'll join us. Hope you have a great weekend.
Have a
So
good one.
long.